Hey guys, it's Mo, and we are on part two of The State Strikes Back, the Scott Peterson, the state's response to the Innocence Project and Scott Peterson demanding more DNA testing. And their response was a 337 page, well, just smackdown with looks like all the facts that the state brought to bear when he was, in first in trial. Now, I did not follow this trial when I was younger and when it was currently going on, but now that I have watched trials for about a year and listened to a lot of legal people that I thoroughly admire, I did want to see if my opinion has changed. Now, he is already guilty of being a mega douchey, cheating, you know, liar, liar, pants on fire pants. But, I want the state to really prove to me that he was the only one beyond a reasonable doubt that could have done this. So let's get into it. The defendant is looking for a serious relationship. If only he had one of those lying around currently. Lacey watches The Bachelor while the defendant claims to be one. The snark in that entire section title is just chef's kiss. Mwah. During November, Sean Shipley gave the defendant Amber Fry's phone number so they could set up a date. The defendant called Amber and they agreed to meet. Well, that should have been a hard pass, swipe left or right or whatever it is that you do on the Tinder. In the middle of the week, when he was coming through town for work, as they talked, the defendant asked Amber if she was intelligent. And she just rolled her eyes to the point that the earth went slightly off of its tilt. Whoever asks that this is a dumb thing. I mean, because there's so many different kinds of intelligence. There's book smarts, there's street smarts, there's emotional intelligence. There are people who, never went to school, but are some of the smartest people I know. So this is just gross and dumb. And Scott, you are dumb for asking that question. On Wednesday, November 20th, 2002, while the defendant was out of town for business, Lacey attended a get together with several of her friends at Lori Ellsworth's house. They watched the final series of The Bachelor together. Meanwhile, at the same time that night, the defendant had his first date with Amber Fry. Sibley agreed to watch Amber's 21-month-old daughter during their date. The plan was to meet at the Elephant Bar in Fresno, then go to a Japanese restaurant for dinner. Amber was waiting in the waiting area of the Elephant Bar when the defendant walked in and greeted her with a big grin. He said he had worked all day. Well, I guess, spinning up malarkey is a job. Ask Chandler Halderson. The defendant was wearing a suit. After the meeting, the defendant indicated he had not had a chance to check into his hotel yet and asked Amber to go with him so he could change his clothes before they went out to dinner. They left together in the defendant's truck and went to the Radisson Hotel in Fresno. The defendant checked in and Amber accompanied him to his hotel room. Once in the room, the defendant behaved like a gentleman. Well, he can fake it for 30 seconds at least. He opened his brown leather duffel bag and pulled out a bottle of champagne and a box of strawberries and poured them 2 drinks. He showered and changed his clothes. Now, maybe I have not dated in several years, but it seems like a very strategery and, planned, move to get her back to the hotel room before they even went on a date. And I don't know. I've not known you for very long. I don't wanna be in the room when you're showering. I mean, I know there are doors on the bathrooms and everything, but it just seems like too much, "I don't know you. That's not my or that's not your purse," kinda behavior. Any hoozle. After meet or let's see. They went to the restaurant where the defendant arranged for a private room for just the two of them to have dinner. How romantic. Also, how not to get caught by anyone else knowing that you're married, having a dinner date with this chick. They stayed there for 3 hours enjoying each other's company until the restaurant closed and the employees asked them to leave. Afterwards, they walked next door to Bebe's bar where they had drinks, sang karaoke together, and slow danced. There, the defendant kissed Amber for the first time. They were staying at BB's until that bar closed, then they stopped at Food Max before back to the defendant's hotel room. Amber found the defendant to be charming, easy to talk to, and he made her feel comfortable. The defendant told Amber he was not married, and Amber never saw him wearing a wedding ring. He said he wanted a serious relationship, which is what Amber was looking for too. The defendant told her he worked at TradeCorp selling fertilizer. He had a warehouse in Modesto, but lived in Sacramento and had a condo in San Diego. The defendant never told Amber he lived in Modesto. The defendant said he was going to be taking a trip to Alaska with his father, brother, and uncle next week for Thanksgiving. He said he would try to talk with Amber over the phone, but he wasn't great with the phone or monogamy. I- it- it's hard. It's very difficult to be monogamous. He said he would try to talk to Amber over the phone, but he wasn't great with the phone. The defendant never told Amber he had a child on the way. However, during their date, the defendant told Amber that he wanted to meet her daughter. Amber spent the night with the defendant in his hotel room. They did the, beast with two backs, but with protection. In the morning, the defendant took Amber back to her vehicle at the Elephant Bar. Before leaving, Amber made a comment about being awkward that they had had the beast with two backs or the horizontal tango on the first date, and the defendant reassured her it was appropriate. No, the dude was like, "Sir, ma'am, we are going too fast. That was a little bit too, too much for me, and we need to step back." Appropriate where, sir? After the date, the defendant called Amber later that day on the 21st of November and said he wanted to stop back on his way through before he left to see her one more time and before he left for Alaska. However, he was not able to stop. Fishing in Alaska versus pushing Lacey in a wheelchair at Disneyland. The following week, the defendant called Amber and said he was on his way to Alaska to go fishing. He also has a bridge to sell you in Wyoming. He In one call, the defendant left Amber a voicemail message and said he was looking through the California hiking tour guide booklet and asked her to think of somewhere she wanted to go. Amber had originally told him that she enjoyed hiking during their first date. After discussions, they planned their second date to go hiking at Squaws Leap in Albury on December 2nd, 2002. On Sunday, November 24th, 2002, Sharon and Ron were at Lacey and the defendant's house for family dinner. Lacey told Sharon that the defendant had joined the Del Rio Country Club. For Thanksgiving, Lacey was supposed to go with the defendant to a baby shower and a trip to Disneyland in Southern California. However, Lacey told her mom that she did not want to go because she wasn't feeling well, her feet were swollen, and she could not walk around the park. Due to her condition, the defendant subsequently pushed Lacey around in a wheelchair when they went to California Adventure Park Disneyland, a hike and a picnic at Squaws Leap for three. On Monday, December 2nd, 2002, the defendant came to Amber's house and gave her an amaryllis plant. Although she did not ask him to, the defendant brought groceries because he planned to make dinner for her that night. After that, they moved the car seat to the defendant's pickup truck and picked up Amber's daughter from school. The defendant drove Amber and her daughter to Squaws Leap in Albury for a hike. Defendant brought items with him for a picnic, which they had until it got chilly. On the way back, Amber's daughter got tired and she became winded. The defendant carried Amber's daughter over nearly 30 minutes walking uphill. Afterwards, they put Amber's daughter in the car seat while Amber said and the defendant sat in the back of the truck looking at the stars together. They went back to Amber's house where the defendant made her seafood lasagna and they shared wine. He talked to her daughter and even brought her a book as a gift. This is the so this is so disgusting. He has a real family. He has an honest to God child, and This is in no way saying that a step parent or a bonus mom or a bonus dad or an auntie who steps in or a grandma can't be a parent to that person, but he is expending all this schmoozy energy on not his own family. Imagine if he had put all of this energy into, telling Lacey he was meh about the upcoming, birth of their child, and they got therapy. And either he decided that he wanted no part of it and just let Lacey be a kick-ass mom, and I'm sure her and Connor would have found a good man and a bonus dad, but instead, he was like, "I don't want any of the responsibility and commitments." Allegedly. Thus far, the state has gotten me to convict of douchery, but not of unaliving. Together, Amber and the defendant looked at her daughter's baby pictures. At one point in the day, Amber made a comment about saving the cork as a kind of memorabilia. She told the defendant she should have saved the cork from their champagne bottle of the first date. The defendant replied that there would be many more corks to come. Ew. First of all, ma'am, that is where you need to ask Elon Musk if you can have a flamethrower. Those are must torch, prior romance items, and I hope you did the dance around the coffee table that was just endemic in every single girl power movie after you torched all this sumbitches, stuff that he gave you. As the night wore on, the defendant mentioned that he had not checked into a hotel yet. In response, Amber told him not to be silly and he could stay the night. On their second date, the defendant slept with Amber and they used protection while they did the, horizontal tangos. Never been married and never close to having any children. The defendant left the following morning on Tuesday, December 3rd, 2002, to go to work. However, he called Amber later that day and asked if he could see her that evening. Amber, who was a massage therapist, had a late appointment and agreed if the defendant would be willing to pick up her daughter and take her home. Ma'am, this is the only thing I'll disagree with you on and slightly judge you, but you really don't know this man. I mean, he proved when he was on national television with a missing wife and child that you really didn't know this man. Giving him access to your child, not a very good thing. Again, I understand that you thought you were building a relationship, but, letting him pick up your kiddo, I would feel really eked out about that. He agreed, and Amber arranged a drop off key to her house and her daughter's car seat for the defendant. When Amber arrived home, she found her daughter sitting in a high chair eating, and the defendant had poured them a glass of wine as he cooked dinner for them. After dinner, the defendant drove Amber and her daughter to Cobb's Ranch to pick out a Christmas tree. When they got back to the house, the defendant carried in the Christmas tree, set it up, and they began to decorate it with Amber's decorations. While decorating the tree, Amber asked the defendant if he had been married ever or close to being married. He said no. Amber asked the defendant if he had any children or had ever been close to having any children. Again, the defendant said no. The defendant spent the night with Amber again on December 23rd. They did what two people in a relation dateship do when they are in the same bed to each other, but they did, use protection. Now, after that, while they were in bed, Amber and the defendant had a conversation about trust in a relationship. Scott Peterson, you have never been even near the town or the country of truthfulness. I mean, your passport has never been stamped there. You have not even drove past or through as, a casual traveler. You just never have lived where the truth is. But the defendant agreed that it was easier to handle the truth rather than having to lie. And his pants weren't on fire at this point, and God didn't send down a well-placed lightning strike. I can't. Fishing on the Delta. The next morning on Wednesday, December 4th, 2002, the defendant left and told Amber he was going to a boat trip over the weekend of the 6th through the 8th with his buddies on the Delta. In actuality, the defendant and Lacey attended a Christmas party at Lacey's friend Renee Tomlinson's neighbor's house on Saturday, December the 7th. C. Defendant lost his wife. Yeah, back in Modesto, as she's gestating. On December 6, 2002, Sean Shipley was speaking to Mike Alamirzi for a business reason, and the defendant's name came up. Alamirzi indicated that he knew Scott Peterson, who worked with TradeCorp, and that he was married and lived in Modesto. Shipley called and confronted the defendant about being married. The defendant repeatedly denied it. Like, I just need Maury Povich somewhere. And so, lie detector says that's a lie. Olson told her to ask the defendant, or Shipley then Sibley then called the defendant's employee, Eric Olson, and asked him if the defendant was married. Olson told her to ask the defendant because he was not going to get involved in the defendant's personal life. An hour later, on December 6, 2002, the defendant called Shibley back and left a voicemail. In the voicemail, the defendant was sobbing and said, "I'm sorry I lied to you earlier. I had been married. It's just too painful for me to talk about. Call me back." Sibley returned the call and left him a message. The defendant called Sibley back and was sobbing hysterically. Ew. And ew that he's putting up this, I mean, these are his practice runs for feeling sad when and if Lacey disappears. So he is already trying to fake this sad emotion. And my guess is that he just thought about his world crumbling, not about losing his wife and his unborn child. But this is a practice run to, get comfortable with the truth. And I am not a behaviorologist. I'm not a Scientologist. I'm barely functional as an adult most days, but the way I see it, he is practicing to get sincerity right for when he actually, quote unquote, loses his wife. The defendant called Sibley back and was sobbing hysterically and told defendant told Sibley, "I'm sorry I lied to you earlier. I had been married. I lost my wife. It's too painful for me to talk about." Friday, December 6, 2002, the ultimatum. Friday, Sibley gives the defendant an ultimatum by Monday. During the December 6th phone call, where the defendant told Sibley he had lost his wife, he begged Sibley not to tell Amber. The defendant pleaded, "Please, just give me the opportunity to tell Amber in person. I'm going to be in town Monday. Please don't tell her. This wasn't just, please let me have a chance to tell her myself." End quote. Sibley told the defendant she didn't care if he was widowed or divorced, but instead, all she cared about is whether he was currently married right now. The defendant responded no. I mean, in the time before you could just Google a guy's name, like the Google kung fu that some women know, some people they'll like, your favorite color is green and your first pet's name was, this. I mean, so people can find a lot of stuff on the internet, and it is interesting to look back at a time where that wasn't the go-to. That wasn't the, first thing you would do when you found out about someone was look at their, digital footprint. So it is really weird to see it from eyes where that is now currently, the easiest thing to do to see if, someone is married or not unless they have no digital footprint. Now, the defendant responded, "No, absolutely not, that he was not married at this time." Again, there was no well placed lightning bolt or his pants spontaneously combusted. Sibley gave the defendant an ultimatum that if he did not tell Amber by Monday, December the 9th, 2002, Sibley was going to tell her. Sibley told the defendant that he needed to let her know as soon as he told Amber, and he agreed to do so. Now, B, Saturday, the defendant searches for a boat. On Saturday, December 7th, 2002, one day after Sean Sibley confronted the defendant about being married and giving him an ultimatum to tell Amber by Monday, the defendant used the couple's home computer to search classified ads for a boat. Beginning at about 9:44 a.m., the defendant reviewed the Modesto Bee from his home computer. At about 4:41 p.m., the defendant looks further at the Modesto Bee classified ads for boat listings, which includes an ad for a 14-foot aluminum boat and trailer. After the laptop was used to search for classified ads for a boat, the defendant called Bruce Peterson, who is not related to him, that is the footnote, who placed the ad in the Modesto Bee regarding a 14-foot aluminum boat he wanted to sell. And Bruce Peterson, I am sure when this blew up, when they figured out what likely happened to Lacey, he felt so gross that it was his boat that was used. But you had no idea that, allegedly Scott Peterson was going to do this. But what this says to me is, again, Scott is practicing, having to play pretend sad. But he now has this ultimatum. He now realizes that his picture perfect, dual lives are going to be blown up if he doesn't do something. So just like Chandler Halderson, the, impetus might have been the dad saying, I've talked to your real college, you're not going. That was probably the impetus for Chandler to start doing his disgusting things. This ultimatum, Scott doesn't want to be responsible. Scott doesn't want a kid because he would have to stop being a kid. He would have to put things, himself last. Lacey's attention wouldn't fully be on him. Amber right now stokes his ego. They're in that new part of a relationship where, it doesn't bother you that he just puts his socks on the floor like there's a damn laundry fairy, or you haven't learned that her mother is a harpy or something like that. So he has this bright shiny thing with none of the real world sort of drawbacks that a real relationship has, because they are in that initial kind of everything is good, everything is great, I couldn't imagine not liking this person kind of thing. And it's so telling that allegedly he is already starting to build a plan. If this information is correct, which they do seem to have, computery people who experted this all out, the amount of pre-planning he did is so chilling. The way he could wear that mask of a good husband and a good future father while looking for boats just is the most scary thing, because he can hide that and he doesn't look like a monster. He does look like a greasy used car salesperson in the worst sense of the term to me, but he doesn't, you know, present as a person that could do something so incredibly selfish and destructive just to not be bothered with responsibility. The defendant told Bruce Peterson that he was interested in purchasing the boat and asked if he could look at it the following day. He agreed, and they planned for the defendant to look at the boat on Sunday. Sunday, the defendant studies tide and currents in the bay. On Sunday morning, about 7:20 or 7:52 a.m., the defendant continued to look at want ads for a boat with a Fresno Bee on his home laptop. Before even owning a boat, the defendant began conducting several Yahoo searches. Now, you know, I will say that the late 90s, early aughts had some pretty dumb things, but if we don't bring back Ask Jeeves as a search engine, I'm going to be very upset. They're mining my late teenage years, early 20s, soullessly for all of the remakes and the, retro stuff. Bring back Ask Jeeves. Any Hoozle, back on point. So even before owning a boat, the defendant began conducting several Yahoo Internet searches using the search terms boats plus ramp plus Pacific, boat ramps Watsonville Pacific, San Francisco Bay boat and ramp. He also looked at navigating a boat and trailer around San Francisco. The defendant reviewed websites relating to nautical charts and maps for the Berkeley Marina, Central San Francisco Bay, and Suisun Bay, including maps of parking at the Berkeley Marina. The defendant began researching water currents of the San Francisco Bay on the home computer. As arranged, the defendant met with Bruce Peterson that morning to look at his 14-foot aluminum fishing boat. Bruce was selling the boat for $1,500 with accessories and the trailer. Bruce indicated that he would keep the two mushroom anchors. The defendant asked where Bruce had used the boat. Bruce told the defendant he had only used the boat in freshwater lakes in the Sierras and foothills, listing the different lakes and reservoirs he went to for trout fishing. Bruce had never taken the boat into salt water. The defendant offered Bruce $1,400 for the boat, which Bruce accepted. The defendant planned to return on Monday morning to purchase the boat after he retrieved cash from the bank. That evening, starting at 9:40 p.m., the defendant resumed his research on the home computer. He accessed the United States Geological Survey's velocity maps for currents in the central San Francisco Bay website. The defendant accessed websites for the San Francisco port and other navigation and nautical chart websites. Pictured below is People's Exhibit 18 or 183B, which shows a screenshot of the interactive USGS site showing, quote, near real time current velocity maps was just one of the websites the defendant reviewed. This exhibit is just one of several exhibits the people introduced or produced at the trial showing different search histories and sites the defendant visited as he conducted his search. I did not know they had real time current maps. Not being a boatologist, this all looks like Greek to me, but that's really cool. The defendant also viewed file or image files which were linked to web pages on Bay Currents. The image files showed an enhanced map view on the tip of Brooks Island and the surrounding area. He looked at nautical charts related to California and Mexico waterways. The defendant also visited multiple fishing related websites and conducted Yahoo searches pertaining to fishing reports and terms such as striped bass and sturgeon fishing tackle in San Francisco. As discussed in further detail below, Lacey had inherited jewelry from her grandmother, and one of the items that she inherited was a Croton watch. At 9:46 p.m., the defendant reposted Lacey's Croton diamond bezel Lacey's watch on eBay along with a picture of the round-faced lady's diamond watch. He then returned to his searches for maps and nautical charts in the San Francisco Bay. The defendant continued his extensive research until about 10:20 p.m. Monday, defendant buys a boat but tells no one. As you do. I mean, I would buy a she shed without prior approval, but with my own money. So, Mr. Mo does the budget and I just semi stick to it all the time. On Monday morning, the defendant returned to Bruce Peterson's house and paid him $1,400 in cash. Bruce and his wife signed off the pink slip, exchanging the title and release of liability into Scott Peterson's name. Following the sale, Bruce mailed the registration to the DMV, showing the title had been transferred to the defendant. Now, here's where things start getting even more shifty. Over the next 15 days, the defendant told no one he had purchased an aluminum fishing boat. Now, again, if this is something that you're not using for shady shiftery, you know, even if they were married and he made a giant purchase without Lacey knowing, that could be considered a betrayal of some sorts because generally, when you're making a big purchase, you talk to your significant other. Now, if he was just using his own personal, like say he got an inheritance, that's a different thing. But For them to have the finances they had and for him to go out and frivolously spend right before a baby's coming is another douche canoe move. So, Scott, you are up to like point value plus 5,000. You have even, spawned an extra life and have healing powers as in douchery. If you were playing World of Warcraft, you would be a monk of doucheness, I think. Look, I don't play that. Numerous witnesses testified that they knew nothing about the defendant's new boat. Lacey usually told her mother, Sharon, about major purchases the couple made, such as when they put in a pool at their house, installed an air conditioning system, and when the defendant joined the Del Rio Country Club. However, Lacey made no mention of the defendant acquiring a new boat. Ron Gransky, who was an avid fisherman, did not know about the defendant's new boat. Lacey's siblings did not know about the defendant's boat. The defendant's father, who spoke to the defendant on a regular basis, did not know about the boat purchase. Lacey's close friends, Stacey Boyer, did not know about the boat. The defendant's good friend, Gregory Reed, who routinely discussed hunting and fishing with the defendant, did not know about the boat. On December 20th, 2002, at about 7 a.m., Olson and Weaver drove to Modesto to pick the defendant up at TradeCorp Warehouse to go to a meeting in Stockton. The defendant did not offer to show either of them his new fishing boat. People's Exhibit number 108D, shown below, is a picture of the 1991 14-foot Game Fisher aluminum fishing boat with its boat cover that the defendant purchased on December 9th, 2002. I do love that they're adding these pictures and kind of walking us through this. I am going to have to read the Innocence Project rebuttal, but I mean, they are basically going step by step, and that's the kind of thing I like to see the state do because they do have the burden of proof. They do get two bites of the apple because they have to prove to me, if I'm a juror, that this man is the most likely person of all the people, in existence to have kidnapped and unalived his wife and son. Monday, December 9th, 2002, defendant indicates this will be his first holiday he will be spending without his wife. Monday, the defendant tells Amber he lost his wife. After going to the bank and purchasing the fishing boat, the defendant saw Amber in the afternoon on Monday, December 9th, 2002. The defendant had called and said he was passing through and was about 20 minutes from her and asked to come see her. When he arrived, Amber observed that his demeanor seemed quite different. As he walked Amber into his house, the defendant said that he was afraid he might have done something terrible to a possible beautiful relationship. The defendant reached into his pocket and pulled out Ladybug chocolates that Amber had previously gifted him. The defendant said he'd been carrying her gift around close to him, but did not deserve them anymore, and he set the chocolates on the table. Them chocolates, he gave her pants chocolate, like he's just been walking around. Never mind. Of all the dumb that is in this case, that is the dumbest. And again, here he is playing a part. Who is the real Scott Peterson? Who is below all of these masks that he wears? That is where I want someone with all the letters behind their names to explain to me how he can comfortably lie. I know sociopathy is, you know, sort of a catch-all phrase or a narcissist, but those are used so much that I'd really like someone, and I'm sure they have, and I just haven't looked at it yet, really do a breakdown of his personality. Because, look, y'all, I cannot lie to save my life. I turn red, I turn splotchy. It's just, it is ugly. So the defendant said he'd been carrying, or he pulled out the chair for her to sit down with him at the kitchen table and began to cry. He appeared to be having a hard time with his emotions, his words coming out, and Amber could hear his stomach churning a bit. Now crying, the defendant told Amber that he had lied about ever being married, and he said that sometimes for himself, when people would ask, it was easier for him to say that he was not or never married because it was too painful for him. And I'm going to just stop here right this second and come on screen and say, sir, the fact that you attempted to pantomime, my story or other widows and widowers who have lost someone they love, the fact that you tried to, I don't know, approximate those feelings and used it as pity, because, those of us who have gone through this situation actually we don't appreciate you putting on, our experiences like a costume. I mean, I know this is one of a multitude, a nebula of Scott, doing the wrong things, Scott being an absolute a-hole, but this one touches a nerve with me. Again, if you have lost someone you love, that is life shattering. Your entire orbit of your life changes in that moment. And yes, you can go on to have a perfectly good life. But the life that you were leading up to that point before you lost that person is no longer the trajectory you're going to have. And the fact that he just throws this on and pretends and uses this as a get out of jail free card, as tying up loose ends, as keeping my lies going is just incredibly gross to me. Any whoozle, back off my, soapbox. The defendant repeated what he told Sean Shibley 3 days earlier. He told Amber he had lost his wife. He explained that she was not with him and it was entirely too painful for him to talk about. The defendant said this was the first holiday that he would be spending without his wife. Again, what these people tend to do, you've seen it with politicians, you've seen it with talking heads, there will be a kernel of truth in there. And the fact that he is again practicing these feelings, um, you know, th- he's trying to Chad Daybell these, future prophecies of, wifelessness to his side piece. I just can't. And Amber, I don't mean that in a derogatory term to you. This douche canoe, you didn't know. You were you didn't know, and as soon as you knew, you went to the cops. So good on you because this must have been just confidence and, you know, being able to read people. I mean, you must have felt completely betrayed, shocked, and horrified. Like, but you did the right thing. So in all of this, I will say that I admire you coming forward and helping the police. The defendant never told Amber that he spoke to Sean Shibley or that about this or that Sean had given him an ultimatum to tell her. Amber thanked the defendant for sharing something that seemed so painful since it was the first holiday without his wife. She asked if he was ready to be in a relationship with her. The defendant replied, absolutely. Amber handed the defendant back the Ladybug chocolates and told him to keep them. The defendant told Amber she was amazing. The defendant gives Amber a separate cell phone number to call. While at Amber's house on Monday, December 9th, 2002, they discussed the defendant's upcoming trip to Europe over New Year's. The defendant told Amber that he was going to go to Paris to spend time with his friend over New Year's before he took his big trip to Europe for business. The defendant explained that he had to go to Europe in order to make some changes to his business so that he was not traveling so much and could spend more time with Amber. The defendant took a piece of paper and wrote down a separate cell number for Amber to call over Christmas and New Year's when he was in Europe. He commented that this had an international plan or something to that effect. The number belonged to his second cell phone. It's what we in the business call a burner phone, if you will. As always, love the burner phones. They're required if you're gonna crime at all. It's like your general kit from Walmart is like tarp, bleach, gloves, burner phone. No, the classics, if you will. Prior to leaving, the defendant made plans with Amber to see each other again, attend a birthday party for Sean Shibley's fiancee 2 days later, on December 11th, 2002, and go with her to a formal Christmas party on December 14th, 2002. As he agreed to do at about 2:30 p.m. to 3 p.m., the defendant called Sean Shibley and informed Sean that he told Amber as he left her house that day. The defendant indicated that Amber was just a great person and decided to forgive him. He again asked Shibley not to tell Amber that she knew. The same day, on December 9th, 2002, the defendant called Eric Olson and told him he should not have met Sean Shibley because he did something stupid. Appraising and pawning Lacey's jewelry. Lacey and Amy had inherited jewelry from their grandmother on their father's side in October or November 2002. Together, the two sisters went through the jewelry and kept what they wanted and gave the other items to their brother, Brent. Lacey kept a gold and diamond watch, a pendant, a diamond screwback earrings, and a couple of rings, one diamond, one sapphire. Lacey liked to wear some of the jewelry, including the watch and diamond pendant. On November 30th, 2002, Lacey visited Edwards Jewelers in Modesto to have certain items of jewelry appraised. Lacey told one of the store employees uh, that the defendant was interested in knowing the value of inherited items. When Lacey learned that the inherited jewelry was worth more than $100,000, she said that the defendant would be pleased. On Tuesday, December 10th, 2002, Lacey brought in some gold chains to a Modesto pawn shop, which she sold for $140. Lacey returned 4 days later on Saturday, December 14th, with the defendant and sold some rings and chains and a charm for $110. Lacey explained that she was cleaning out her jewelry box and some of the items came from her grandmother. Lacey seemed agitated and hesitant when the defendant was rubbing her stomach in the store. She pushed his hand away. Tori Brooks, who owned the store with her husband, sensed that there was a problem between the Lacey and the defendant. As discussed in further detail below, later forensic examination of the Peterson computers received email exchanges involving the email account SLPT or PETELMSN.com and the sale of additional jewelry on December 2022 on eBay, including her inherited Croton watch, among other things. Defendant takes Amber and her daughter to a birthday party. On December 11th, 2002, the defendant went with Amber and her daughter to Sean Shibley's fiance's birthday party in Fresno. Prior to leaving for the party, the defendant changed Amber's daughter's bandages. Together, the three of them attended the party. While at the party, the defendant was outgoing and very personable with Amber and Sibley's friends. Again, these type of people have that surface charm that either instantly puts people at ease or makes me very nervous. And I feel badly because I'm sure that most of the people that, seem to be very extroverted and somewhat surfacely charming are good people, like 97%, but that surface charm that I don't see anything behind, you smile, but your eyes don't smile, those people creep me out. Amber explained that the positive manner of the defendant interacting with her daughters and friends enhanced her trust in the defendant, or her trust in the defendant. Before they went to the party together, Amber and the defendant rented a tuxedo for a Christmas formal they planned to go on December 14th, 2002. Initially, the defendant told Amber he was not sure he would be able to make it because he had business with his boss. If that was the case, Amber planned to attend herself. December 14th, 2002, Lacey's last Christmas party. And I believe this might be the one where she's in the red outfit that we have all become familiar with, but she just looks glowing and happy. And that casual, cool elegance that some people just carry off. They could be in a t-shirt and like running shorts with a messy ponytail, and they still look effortlessly put together. It is it is an awesome skill to have. I don't, but and I am envious. On Saturday, December 14th, 2002, the defendant was supposed to go with Lacey to their friend's Christmas party, but the defendant had canceled. The defendant told Lacey he had to go to San Francisco to meet with his boss, who was flying in last minute, and had to meet him for business. Defendant claimed that the trip could not wait because it was the only time when his boss was going to be in San Francisco. That evening, Lacey dressed up in one of the outfits she had purchased from Motherhood Maternity and went to Stacy Boyer's Christmas party by herself. Depicted below in People's Exhibit number 14, which shows the photo of Lacey wearing her red silk short sleeve shell and cropped pants on December 14th, 2002. I mean, she just looks so happy. You cannot be comfortable when you are that big and pregnant, but she just looks so happy. I mean, so expectant, so those heels I would not wear when I was pregnant, but oh my gosh, if she could pull off those heels and pregnant, madam, you were a picture of grace. Although Stacy only lived just down the street, Lacey was exhausted by the time she made it to Stacy's front door. Lacey was carrying a plant in one hand and food that she brought in the other. Lacey walked 3 or 4 houses around a big water puddle in the front yard that pooled from earlier rain. Lacey told her friends she was really excited waiting for the baby to come, but she was getting very tired and it was hard for her to walk. They laughed about Lacey wearing heels with her swollen ankles. Lacey joked back that she had to wear them sometimes and she wanted to look very nice and proper. That night, Lacey wore the diamond watch she inherited from her grandmother. Lacey sat in a chair for most of the time and she was there and left after a couple hours. Meanwhile, on Saturday, December 14th, 2002, defendant returned to Amber's house. The defendant called Amber earlier and said he had been in San Francisco and was able to get away to attend the formal Christmas party with her. However, he had to return to work the next day. When he arrived, the defendant greeted Amber at the door and handed her a dozen roses. I mean, he is love bombing her to the ends of the earth. I can imagine it probably felt really cool and really great for Amber to meet a nice guy who was showing so much interest, who seemed to be a genuine guy. So I can't imagine what she was going through when she found out everything. He gave her a hug and said hello. The defendant pulled out 2 dozen more pink roses and gave them to her for a total of 3 dozen roses. They made their way inside the house. The defendant lit a candle and kissed her softly while rubbing the petals of the rose on her. Look, I don't need to know this stuff. Like, this is, ugh. Okay. The defendant went into the kitchen and warmed up some caramels and made her favorite, a homemade Pink Lady caramel apple, as Amber got dressed for the formal. Amber asked the defendant how she should introduce their relationship. The defendant said he was not seeing anyone else and he was monogamous. Sir, you and monogamy have never even, like, sidestepped each other on a street. You and monogamy have never even been in the same, like, international airport and just run into each other. Really? You meant megalomaniac. He suggested to introduce him as her lover. Ew. Just no. Look, I don't care who you are. I know that when you're in a relationship, you're generally doing the beast with two backs. But announcing someone as my lover has just always given me the cringe shivers. Like that thing that's just like, ooh. Anywho, this is my hang up, not yours. Amber said that it did not seem appropriate. She should have said it gives her cringe shivers. The defendant then suggested my love. Considering you've only been with him for 3 days, love is kind of a big thing to say. Amber asked if he was seeing anyone else, and he said he was not. No, he wasn't seeing anyone else. He's just married. Ugh. Amber asked if she should introduce him as her boyfriend, and the defendant said that would be appropriate. They left for the party and picked up Amber's friend Psyche, and attended the formal in Fresno. During the party, the defendant introduced Amber as his girlfriend. They memorialized the evening with photos. Dude, if you're gonna be cheating, stepping out on your wife, and possibly planning to, haul her body and your unborn son into the bay, perhaps don't take photographic evidence of your exact douche canoeiness. People's Trial Exhibits number 190A and 191A and 191G, seen below, were taken the night of Amber's formal Christmas party on December 14th, 2002. After the party, they stopped at Saki's house for a bit, then returned to her house where they were intimate. That night, they did not protect each other during the, beast with the two backs. Afterwards, the defendant apologized for not taking any precautions during that time, and they started talking about birth control methods. Amber told the defendant she wanted to have more children. The defendant responded that for himself being with her, that he did not feel the need to have a biological child. You gross, disgusting, corroded trash water douche canoe of the highest proportions. If they were together, then he would consider his daughter his own, and that would be enough for him. As they raised her together, the defendant indicated he wanted to have a vasectomy versus Amber having to take birth control pills. This upset Amber because she considered a vasectomy permanent birth control, and he was young to be making such a permanent decision. This would be your red flag number 1 quadrillion. The defendant never mentioned that he was expecting his first son, Connor. The defendant spent the entire night and left the following morning on Sunday, December 15th, 2002. Prior to leaving, Amber gave the defendant a Christmas card with a picture of her and her daughter. The defendant told her he had some business that he had to take care of before he was going to leave on his long trip for the holidays. He said he would be back at the end of January. In the interim, they could stay in contact by phone. The evening of December 15th, 2002, Lacey's mom and stepfather, Sharon and Ron Gransky, came over for family dinner. The defendant was supposed to make lasagna. Disappointed that he was not going to be home in time, Lacey bought a frozen lasagna. During dinner, Sharon and Rod told the defendant and Lacey that Sharon had gone fishing with Ron that morning. Lacey was really surprised that Sharon went fishing with Ron because she's not passionate about it. Ron is an avid fisherman who goes fishing every chance he gets. However, it was extremely rare that Sharon would accompany him. The defendant never told Ron or Sharon that he had purchased a fishing boat 6 days earlier, or that he wanted to take Ron fishing. Lacey never mentioned to her mom and stepdad that the defendant now owned a fishing boat. This is the last time Sharon sees her daughter. I can't imagine the heartbreak of losing a child. It's a hole in your heart that never goes away. Your life grows around it, but it's still there every day. Some days I'm sure you're just making it minute to minute. The defendant is, quote, away on business, and Lacey continues to prepare for Connor's arrival. On December 17th, 2002, Lacey and the defendant went to Carmel with Jackie and Lee Peterson for a couple days. They returned home on okay, so that's caramel. We have a Carmel in Indiana, and you do not say caramel. Look, it, okay, you went fancy on caramel. All right. They returned home on Thursday, December 19th 2002 around 1 p.m. 21 minutes later, the defendant spoke to Amber on the phone and told her he was in New Mexico or Arizona for business at that time. That night, Lacey told her mom, Sharon, that she went shopping while she was in Caramel, but Lacey was really tired and her feet were swollen. That Friday, Lacey spoke to her mom, Sharon, over the phone and discussed the baby shower. During the call, Lacey told Sharon that she had a doctor's appointment on Monday, the 23rd, and after that appointment, the plan was to go to the hospital to pre-register. Later that day, Lacey called her friend Renee Tomlinson and she told Renee that she had been shopping and bought some fabric for the baby's cradle. Lacey told Renee she was feeling tired and ready to have the baby, that she was no longer working. On Saturday, December 21st, 2002, believing the defendant had left for his out-of-state travels, Lacey tried to reach him on the other cell phone number he provided her on December the 9th. The first time Amber called his second phone was on Saturday, December 21st, 2002 at 11:21 a.m. Amber was unable to reach the defendant and tried his original cell phone number again at 1:11 p.m. The following day, on Sunday, December 22nd, Amber called both phone numbers at 8:46 a.m. Later that day, the defendant called Amber from a 916 area code and left a brief message that he was getting ready to meet his mother and father in Maine for the holidays. In the message, the defendant said he planned to be with his parents over Christmas until December 28th, when he would fly to Paris for New Year's. Amber redialed the number and learned that the defendant had called from a payphone at the Sacramento airport, so she called the airport and had the defendant paged. However, he never responded to her page. The evidence showed that the defendant did not fly to Maine. Karen Service is Lacey and the defendant's next door neighbor to the south. She lived there prior to the defendant and Lacey moving in 2000, and has been over to the Peterson house on multiple occasions. On Sunday, December 22nd, 2002, between 2 and 3 p.m., Karen saw the defendant mowing the front lawn while Lacey was standing out front. Once he finished, Karen walked into their backyard to talk to them and ask the defendant for some help straightening her Christmas tree. The couple was transplanting plants at the time. Lacey told Karen that she felt tired and mentioned she'd had an episode which occurred 2 weeks earlier where Lacey was off balance and almost fell into the pool. Now, total tinfoil conspiracy theory, but could this douche have been maybe spiking something she was eating? Again, these can all be normal pregnancy things, but it seems to me that this would have been a much more convenient and easy way for Scott to get rid of his wife, and maybe it wasn't working quickly enough. I mean, he was coming up to a deadline. Connor is going to be born. Once you reach 37 weeks, you can go at any time. So I am going to leave that there and I will start a part three. But thank you guys for joining me when I am reading this and kind of putting my 2 cents into it. I definitely enjoy getting a closer insight to what the state planned and then seeing what the Innocence Project and Scott Peterson are alleging, will change if they test the DNA for a third time or if this is new DNA. Anyhoozle, have a great rest of your day, morning, evening, or wherever you are, and however you are listening. Thank you so much. I will see you guys later, and I will be working on part three after I drink some tea and honey. So have a great day, you guys. Bye.